All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everybody for joining us today. We're really excited to have you all here. Welcome to the second of our federal grant webinar series hosted by the Colorado Farm and Food Systems Response Team. Our partners in this endeavor are the Colorado Farm and Food System Response Team, Nourish Colorado, the Colorado Food Systems Advisory Council, and the Food Systems team at Colorado State University. So you're, like I said, we're in the second of our three-part federal grant webinar series. This is Stories of Successful Federal Food System Grant Applicants. That's a nice little mouthful. Basically, today you're gonna hear from four different, two organizations and two farmers that were able to successfully apply for and receive USDA grants. So they're gonna talk about those. So we'll hear from a range of different USDA grants that are out there and what it took to get those and some lessons learned from folks. So we're super excited about this. Please do also join us for a third webinar in our series, which is going to focus on how to improve this process. So the first one last week was kind of a big overview of how to develop a successful grant. Today is, hearing stories from other folks in the state that have been successful and have good wisdom to share. And then our final one, which will be in 2 weeks, is going to be providing feedback about how the process is. We know that it doesn't work for everybody. We know that it's not necessarily accessible to everyone. So we really want to get your feedback on that, and that will help us figure out ways to share that. We are hoping and should have some folks from the Colorado Department of Ag on that call so that they can hear directly from you all about what's working or not working for state level funding. So again, we really hope you'll be there to share your experiences with them. The Colorado Food System Advisory Council will also will be part of one of the hosts for that, and they have a direct line to provide feedback to the governor and to CDA. And then we'll be working on how we can provide feedback on the federal process. So please join us for that. And great. So diving into today's webinar, we have 4 presenters today, and they're all going to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about their farm or organization, and also some of the things that they took away or lessons they learned. So we have Katie Slaughter with Native Hill Farm, K-Above Savage with Savage Spectrum, Anna Schott with Go Farm, and Nana Meyer with CU Colorado Springs. And they'll be able to do intros here in a second for themselves. If you do have questions throughout the call, please feel free to chat them in. We will have a question and answer session at the end as well, but feel free to keep chatting in questions. And one other piece I do want to say, and Wendy, hopefully you can put the link to the survey in. So we have a survey that we're hoping you all will fill out. It'll help us gauge kind of where we're at as a food system in Colorado, trying to apply for these grants, trying to get through the process, what grants people are applying for, and that will help us all kind of better figure out how to support you all in this process. And again, provide direct feedback to the state and federal processes, as well as COSTAC is actually working on a white paper at the moment to kind of outline how these things can be improved. So this is a great way for you to give that feedback. All right, so I am going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to turn it over to Anna Schott, who's going to start off our presentations, name and your organization, and a couple words of wisdom for everybody.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Anna Schott. I'm the programs director for Go Farm. Go Farm is based in Golden. We're a nonprofit. We have 3 main programs. The first is farmer assistance. We have an incubator program for farmers for people that are interested in starting a career in farming. We have mentorship, training, land access. Our second program is our local food share, which is similar to a multi-farm CSA. So we have over 700 shareholders each season, providing them weekly access to fresh fruits and vegetables. And then our community food access program is really focused on access and affordability of fresh produce. We do low-cost markets at different community locations, such as Head Starts. In terms of my quick piece of advice, and I should also mention, we had a local food promotion program that actually just ended last year. And then we transitioned into a farmers market promotion program grant. We also have a beginners, farmers, and ranchers development program, and that's funding our incubator program, and then a community food project that's really more focused on our community food access work. So happy to answer any questions about any of those 4 different grant opportunities. My quick pieces of advice are start early. I think that came across on Becca and Dawn's presentation as well, but start early because the narrative is certainly not the only piece of a federal grant, and make sure you're getting into grants.gov and kind of seeing all the different pieces because there are a lot of elements to a federal application. Probably the second one, get plugged into the staff. I mean, the AMS staff is really friendly, really approachable, and I think it can be intimidating, like, oh, I can't reach out to them, like federal government, but they're really approachable. And if you can get on, the webinars, you'll get a lot of tips. They always do webinars for their grants. Email them with questions. Like, they are very accessible and approachable. Did I hit all the points?
Yes. Do you want to just maybe go a little bit more in depth on at least 1 or 2 of the grants in terms of what the actual project was for those grants?
Sure. So the local food promotion program and farmers market promotion program, really both were for our local food share. And the first one was the LFPP. And that was really about kind of scaling up our infrastructure. So for that program, we use refrigerated shipping containers at different locations in the community. And really that first grant program was about getting from 1 container to 4 containers. And that happened over the span of 3 years. And then our FMPP was really more about kind of making sure that program stays around and is self-sufficient, is sustainable. So we're really focusing on education in the community, making sure that people who engage with the local food share, start to understand what it means to support local and buy local food. And hopefully we're creating, lifelong local food enthusiasts, not just people that do it one year and kind of disappear.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Yes, and we'll do questions as well throughout. So Katie, do you want to introduce yourself and your farm and talk a little bit about the grant that you got and a couple of quick pieces of advice, and we'll get more into those pieces as well.
Sure. Hi, my name is Katie Slota, and I am with my husband, owner and operator of Native Hill Farm. We got a value-added producer grant in 2018, which is ending this July, I guess. And we got our grant in order to, there were several things we were trying to do, but we basically were trying to make a farm store in an area where they're just like, we were looking for like a new market, I guess is what we were trying to do. So open up a new market where there wasn't necessarily one, sort of add an enterprise to our farm. We qualified for the value added producer grant because organic, locally sold and marketed food is considered a value added product. And I'm trying to think of anything else in particular. So basically that's what we did. We made a farm store and we sell, we increased the number of CSA members, and we did a ton of marketing with the grant. So that was what we mostly did with it. Piece of advice, I guess, definitely sort of have a game plan when it comes to what you really want to do. These grants are not that flexible, as we found, and so if you just be very either very broad or specific, but make sure you have exactly sort of what you want to see happen from that grant. Also, having partnerships really helps with that cash match. And so we reached out to a few people that the way we sort of made the grant, they really did help us put in money in kind for that cash match, and that helped a small farm like us qualify for the program. So those would be my 2 pieces of advice.
Thanks, Katie. Nana, do you want to introduce yourself and your organization?
Yeah, I'm Nana Meyer. I'm a professor at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, UCCS, and I'm in physiology and human nutrition. And in the last 4 or 5 years, we've been focusing a lot more on bringing local food into the university, and part of our inquiry in local food and farm to institution was grain related. And so we were interested in bringing more of the heritage grains, and that started our grain school in 2016. And so I'm saying I'm letting you know about the grain school first, because it really brought the proof of concept to the grant, and without that, I don't think we would have had a chance. So it's a really important lesson, I think, for me. And grain school is basically an educational opportunity for students on campus and community members. And it's been in person first, and now we are online. But the grant that we got was a farmers market promotion program grant, and it focuses on the Colorado Grain Chain, which is an organization, a business-to-business organization, and it came out of grain school based on a USDA rural development grant, business grant. So we had that first, and so we were able to show that the organization was launched and this has already a certain membership. And so our grant focuses on expanding markets for heritage and whole grain growers and makers of value-added products. And so we focus on 3 different objectives. One is to expand this marketing and through a marketing and co-branding initiative, improving and increasing educational opportunities and expanding those opportunities to those people who cannot be receiving them because of their remote location. And those were focused on Grain School Online, which is now our Grain School Going Online, and Grain School in the Field with more kind of experiential learning. And then finally, the consumer outreach with grain literacy approaches. On one hand, directly through Grain Homeschool, which is maybe something that you have heard of before with the Colorado Grain Chain. It's a weekly or monthly course that everybody can take. And then also through our Grain Roadshow, which started with Slow Food Nation, where we go to communities and set up a really nice show where people learn about everything from grain, from the production all the way to milling and baking, brewing, and get some tasters. Obviously, this was pre-COVID. So some of those educational strategies are also through partnerships that relate to farm and food organizations first in the first year. In the second year, and third year, we focus more on health and education partners. So direct-to-consumer marketing is our first year approach, and then from there we go into the mid-tier value chains such as food hubs, retail, restaurants, and institutions. So this grain-to-institution focus is also part of the grant. My takeaways, my goodness, this grant definitely pushed me over the hill last spring. So everybody that knows these USDA grants, they are hard to tackle. They really require meticulous attention to detail and a proof of concept, whether that's a feasibility study or something that works and that you can bring to the table. And that thread, I think a clear thread or a clear idea of what you want to do. It's also, I think, important to understand that your objectives of the grant relate to the work plan that you're writing, relate to the milestones, relate to the outcomes, and those have to be the outcomes that are provided by the grant itself, plus your individual or your specific grant outcomes. But it's probably a good way to look at those outcomes first to see if your program can do what those outcomes are related to. And so I just think that these grants are best done together and not alone, in collaboration with others. And I certainly had mentorship and support from Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, who have a lot of experience. So, get help from all of us who have done this successfully, and then we're more successful in the state of Colorado. It's definitely an endeavor. Our grant is a 3-year grant.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nana. All right. And Kaibab, do you want to talk about your farm and winery and the grant that you got?
Absolutely. Yeah, so my name is Kaibab Savage, and my farming operation is Colorado Vineyard Specialists. We're here in Palisade. We've been growing grapes here for the last 21 years and selling our grapes to about 26 different wineries throughout the state and throughout the West. Really, we work with several other states, and we've grown and grown and grown and kept growing, which was fantastic. And we came up with a couple bumper crops and decided that we should launch our own winery. So our winery is Sauvage Spectrum. And once we did that, I got a phone call from Becca, and she's like, "Hey, you have a winery now. You qualify for a value-added producer grant." I was like, never heard of it. Looked into it, and really glad I did. It was a huge process to undertaking, like these other folks have spoke to. Just, you really have to understand what you want to do very well and the steps to get there. And by going through this process, I have a better understanding of my business than I ever really thought I would. And we have goals and markers along the way. We use this money from the grant towards marketing, towards supplies, and towards labor and sales. And it's really neat to see the whole process working and coming together, as we start reaching these milestones. And it's amazing the amount of detail that you put into it. But doing that legwork, I mean, that's the reward for, I suppose, the amount of time you put in on the grant process is understanding your business that well and fully utilizing the capital that they're giving you correctly. So yeah, my biggest things is be ready for the time commitment. I started a little late, and I compared it to preparing my senior thesis when I was in college. I mean, it took every ounce of creativity, energy, resolution to just stay focused and get it done. And yeah, that's kind of my biggest things, takeaways from that.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. So you've kind of already touched a little bit on this, but I'm curious if you can share what the biggest challenge was, and then what was something that went well, or maybe you were surprised, oh, that was really easy, or I didn't have to think about that one too much.
Is that addressed to me or who?
Why don't you start? Yes, and then all of you can answer it.
I just covered that. I mean, definitely the time commitment and just digging that deep into exactly what your goals are with what you're doing. We went through taking our grapes, adding value to them by making them into wine. How much value does that add? And now we need a marketing plan. How do we differentiate ourselves in the market to make us stand out? And I think the grant process likes to see people doing creative things. And so we looked into the sparkling segment, realizing that that's an underrepresented segment in Colorado wine industry, and it's really treated us well. But more than that, we went into these trendy, natural bottle fermented sparkling wines, and those are blowing up and doing great. And then we have our traditional still wines. And so that's kind of the idea with our name, Sauvage Spectrum, is Sauvage is French for wild. It's the wild spectrum. And so we're bringing all these elements of the spectrum together and manifesting it into our wines we're making, which the grant has helped us be able to do.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Katie, Anna, or Nana, and if you guys want to talk about something that went well and surprised you, or what was challenging.
I can speak a little bit to that if you want. There were a lot of challenges, at least, like, I guess, head banging against the wall when you're trying to, you read through the grant the first time and you're like, oh, this is like no big deal. And then you like really start getting into it. And then you realize like just how many parts there are to it. And just like, we got started a little bit late too, because Becca's always so good at being like, hey, there's a bunch of money for this. And then like, you're like, okay, cool. What do I have to do? And then, but anyway, once I started, I was like, well, we started this thing, so I guess we got to keep going. And so it was definitely a challenge, just getting all the parts and pieces together and really understanding like what you could and could not do with the grant. I find these federal grants to be extremely restrictive and what they're trying to get you to do, as for whatever the grant is. And so that, like I said, I think, and Bob said it too, there was a lot of head banging against the wall. But I will say, I totally agree with him. We've had some interesting circumstances on our farm. And so we weren't really, our timeline was really off on how we used the grant. And so our timeline just kind of shrunk real quick. And so it's unclear as to how much the grant actually helped us and like how much COVID sort of made sort of the things, a lot of the stuff we did with the grant possible. But basically, I mean, we as farmers, I'm sure if you're a farmer, you have very little money for marketing. And so it was really transformative for us because, we were able to just spend a lot more money on professional marketing, pay a graphic designer to do stuff. And literally like we had we met our goal in 1 year rather than 3 years, which was amazing. And so we have, in fact, we surpassed our goal. We had a 33% increase in revenue, which is pretty amazing. And we, I don't even know, 100 times more marketing money than we've ever had. And so I don't know if I think that's like kind of the difficult thing about marketing for all marketers is like, what's really making the difference? Like tracking the marketing and trying to figure out like, what was it that really like helped us increase sales? Like those things are really hard to pinpoint. And like I said, maybe it was all the discrete marketing we did, and maybe it was COVID. I don't know. We always say in farming, 3 points define a line, right? So we'll see what happens this year and next year. But so far it's been really great for us, especially when we didn't know what we were going to do in the beginning with COVID and how to like even sell our product. The farm store ended up just being like such an amazing thing to have, because people were uncomfortable going to markets. And we were actually able to staff the store, so we could use the money to staff the store until we got it running, like basically on a honor system situation. And so that was really great too. So it's totally worth doing. One other challenge that I've found is that you really have to be prepared to wait because the federal grant system does not cough up the money easily that it's supposed to give you. And so like, I would not do anything that would put yourself in a financial pinch thinking that you're going to get money quickly, because, and this is again a fluke year. I mean, it might be faster to get money in a year where people aren't juggling childcare and trying to work from home and, process your VAPG request. But, we put in our first request for money 6 months ago and haven't seen anything yet. So, we're certainly not dying, but we would love to get the money that is like owed to us. So from the grant. So that was another challenge. Just be prepared to like wait. I mean, we've been assured we're going to get the money, but and they said like when we put in for our first like reimbursement that it was the most put together one they'd ever seen. So I mean, that was, it was a little bit like it felt a little bit frustrating because we're like, okay, if this is good, then like, why can't we get this money? So anyway, it's just taking a long time. So that's one challenge that we found. But
Yeah,
that's all for me.
No, that's super important. And yes, definitely things to keep in mind for folks. Nana, did you want to go?
Yeah, just connecting to Sauvage, or Kaibab is your first name. I think that, the grain, to speak to grain and the current artisan movement across the United States is very attractive. And I think that we had certainly a niche product. And we knew that another university, Chatham University, got an FMPP or LFPP, one of the two. I'm not sure exactly, but we knew that they had one in the previous years, and so that gave us some strength there too. But I do think that artisanship that can come out from food and the products and the value add that can come out is a great opportunity to leverage, particularly now for growers and for makers who are connected to growers. And the grain chain is really a special, maybe a little bit more of an awareness building that we have to, in the grain space, work together. It doesn't work alone. Grain production is too big, and there's a lot of equipment needed and infrastructure needed. And so from the beginning, I think we had a network already and lots of collaborations going on, and I think that strengthened it too. And it with these types of grants, if you're connected in the community with partners and collaborators already, I think it does help, because you will need to have letters of support, and those letters need to be set up early. And I think it is helpful to write a template and then let your partners or collaborators write the letters so that they suit them better. But that needs to happen early, and so that's also kind of a meticulous pathway forward, where you have to watch your dates carefully of those letters and who is writing those letters and the signatures on the letters. So there's just lots of attention to detail that requires time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I wanted to share, and this is maybe a little bit more general, but I think, one challenge is always finding the balance between writing the grant to really match what you want to do for your program, versus, I think they're looking for this, so we should say that we're going to do this. And that's a really dangerous path to go down. It can certainly be tempting, but I think the more you can stick to writing it around what you really want to be doing, the better off you are in the long run. And I think that goes for any grant, not just these federal grants. And then for those of you that are coming from an organization, just making sure that whoever is going to be really involved on the ground with implementing the project, making sure that they are part of the conversation in deciding what the objectives are and what the activities are, so that, if you get funded and then it's their responsibility to carry this out, that they feel like they were part of designing it. And I think, the flip side of that is grant writing is program planning. So even if you don't get funded, you've spent a lot of time planning this really great program, and you have a path forward, and you can seek funding elsewhere using a lot of the same language from your grant narrative. So.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Lots of good advice and wisdom. So we do have a couple questions that have come in. Again, please feel free to chat questions in, and we'll get to them, and we'll open it up pretty soon to you. But one question for all of you is the cash that's hard to say, the match, right, that you're required to provide for all of these. Can you all talk a little bit about where you were able to find that? I know there's different pieces of that. So talk a little bit about, was it in kind? Was it other private foundation grant money? Where were you able to get that matching piece? And how much was required? Because it is a little different by grant. Anna, you're still up on my screen, so you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, and they all are a little bit different. I'm not sure that any of the grants that we've applied for required a cash match per se. I think in kind was always allowable. So obviously, the more collaborative your application is, the more opportunities for in-kind matching there is. We have also used cash match from private foundation. And I think you'll find that if you do have a private foundation funding some of your work, they are more than happy to write that letter of support or write that match letter, because they like to see that their funds are being leveraged to do even more work. So that's not a hard thing to ask for from a private foundation.
Do either of our Katie or Kaibab, you want to talk about on the farming side what that looked like?
Yeah, I'm happy to. You know, we got pretty creative, I would say, with the cash match because there were a lot of restrictions on our grant. Our cash match was 1-to-1, so like for every dollar that we spent, that we had to create another dollar, either with a cash or in kind, and the in kind from the farmer could only be 10% of the in kind. So there was, there was a lot of math. There was a lot of spreadsheets and a lot of like, how much is this and how much is that? So it was, I redid that a lot. I spent a lot of time doing that. But like I said, with the collaborations, that was super helpful. If you can collaborate with people and get creative, things like rent, with, places that you might be able to collaborate with, like in-kind rent. I mean, that could be like a huge, I know that's kind of confusing, but like, so say you're going to start a farm store and you need to rent a space for it instead of like buying your own or creating your own. If you can find a business that will collaborate with you and give you in-kind rent, that's a really good way to help find some of that cash match donation, because it's sort of a win-win for them. Like it's a double draw, right? Our vegetables and their pie shop or whatever it is that they were, that whoever it is you're going to collaborate with. Also, for us, we wanted to take full advantage of the, our own personal sweat equity. And so making sure that we wrote ourselves into the grant as, like in-kind employees and whatnot. And then, again, if we hadn't been at the place in our farm that we were, which, we've been farming for 12 years, which for some people isn't very long, but I think for, market farms, it's, it's a significant amount of time. And so we did have the money to support the project that we wanted to do. And so that was, very helpful that we sort of already knew where we wanted to go with this. And so it just stretched our dollar and stretched the risk that we were taking basically for the project, which was nice. And then of course, technical support is another good place to find in-kind donations. I know Becca was nice enough to extend her in-kind support with technical support for our grant, which was really great too. So, because those CSU people get paid a lot more than we do. So, kidding.
Awesome. Any others that you guys want to share?
Yeah, I could speak to that in just a little bit. So Katie, you get paid in farming? We don't think we get paid. I just wanted to speak to the matching. It can be kind of intimidating figuring out how to use the dollars in the grant because you can't buy certain things. And so kind of what worked for us on the cash side of the matching, we used it to buy things we already were going to purchase, like grapes to make wine and our supplies. And so that worked on the cash side of things because these were already purchases that we were going to have to make. And what, like Katie said, we had a 1-to-1 match. And so whatever we got, we had to match that, and half of that with cash and half with in-kind. And then the in-kind, we were able to use some of my time. Our winemaker donated a lot of his time as well. And then we had Becca on the consulting side as well. And so that's where we got the in-kind donations. And then, yeah, once again, the cash or the other ways to use that is rents. Like Katie said, is a great way to use that. You could use it on rent that you might get donated in kind or would already have to pay, or for utilities, which you're going to have to pay already. And so just figuring out how to make it all work together with their guidelines, I think was kind of a bit of a challenge, but once you wrap your head around it, it kind of starts making sense.
Awesome, thank you. Lana, anything that has been missed on the matching side?
It's just, I think we had a pretty conventional matching approach. For the FMPPs, you only need 25%, which is relatively easy if you have, your key personnel, some of whom are at a university. So for us, we work with CU Boulder, and we were able to get a match from CU Boulder's media department. Colorado Grain Chain, a board, for example, can provide you with match, particularly if it's working toward the program goals. So you have to be careful with these because an organization cannot be supported or marketed. So our grant is not about the Colorado Grain Chain, it's about Colorado grown grains. And so that needs to be carefully disseminated. But these matches at a university level are pretty easy to come by.
Awesome, thank you all. Yeah, we had another question, and this is probably mainly aimed at our two farmers, but about but Nana, I know you mentioned it too, the feasibility study. And I know we've definitely gotten some questions after the last webinar about, how to do the feasibility study, who to have it do it, how long does it take? I know it's required, obviously, for the VAPG, the Value Added Producer Grants. So if you guys can just talk a little bit about your experience trying to get a feasibility study, what that was like, any recommendations or thoughts for folks.
I'm happy to speak to that for, a little bit. I have sort of limited experience with it because when we did ours in 2018, we had an either or. So it was either you had to have a feasibility study or you had to have a business plan. And so, I took the chicken route and went with the business plan, which was actually really helpful because, it's sort of, we're the kind of farm, and I think a lot of farmers do this, that you just kind of go where your gut takes you, or you make decisions as you see like opportunities. And so we hadn't rewritten our business plan in a really long time. So it was actually really helpful to write it out and just sort of see where we were and where we were going, and kind of make a case for why we thought that our project would be a good project. And so that was a really good exercise in doing that, sort of piggyback on what Anna said. And as I did chat briefly with Becca about the feasibility study, so that's why I sort of, it seemed intimidating that I would have to pay somebody $5,000 to do a feasibility study about something that I just thought was the best idea. And but I think that it now that I'm sort of reflecting on it, I think that it is actually a really good requirement to have some type of requirement for something like that, because it can really save you a lot of time in the long run. If your plan isn't good, people will be able to see things that you might be blindsided with, and you could spend a lot of money on a project that is just going to go nowhere. For example, not that we spent a lot of money on a project that went nowhere, but for example, our farm does a lot of research into what other farms do and what works for them and what doesn't. And so we spend money going down to other farms and touring and asking questions. And, and that's that really helps us sort of wrap our brains around like what's really going to work and what's not going to work. And we also participated in a CSU study in which they did like a market channel assessment for us. And so we were able to use data from that to sort of make our case that our grant, or the project that we wanted to do, would be feasible. So that was, it's worth doing those things sometimes, even though they're kind of a pain in your butt, as a lot of farmers think. So all of those little things that sort of add up, I think, over time. So if I had to do it again, like, and it needed a feasibility study, I would probably definitely, all I'm meaning to say is that it's probably worth doing, because it really will help you kind of get a better idea of what you're trying to do and see it from another person's point of view.
Yeah, thanks. Kaibab, anything you want to add?
Yeah, definitely. So at the level we were at, we applied in 2019. We had to have a business plan and a feasibility study, which I found out a little late that I needed a feasibility study. And the first gal I called said, "I'm booked, I can't do it." No matter, it was still $5,000. She just couldn't do it. And so I started doing some digging, and I found a lady here local, which was great. Her name is Julie Shiflett, and it's Juniper Consulting. And she came out like that week, which was amazing. Came to the winery, went around to some different liquor stores we were in and took pictures of our placement and our products, and got us a feasibility study in the time frame, because we had put all the work into this project not knowing it was required until the very end. And we were very fortunate to have her work with us, and even more so that she found that our project was feasible, which was great, because that would really stink if you paid someone all that money and they're like, bad idea.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, I mean, I think that's part of why we've been trying to bring it up with folks. Ideally do that in the beginning. Hopefully then you don't put lots of time and effort into something that isn't going to work. But yeah. Awesome. Well, we had another question from Betsy about how much or what percentage you guys are using for the marketing expenses. And sorry, Betsy, are you talking about the VAP, the value added producer grant, or because I'm assuming that the grants have different requirements in terms of how much?
I was curious about that one in particular.
Okay. So Katie and Kaibab, you guys are up again. How much?
Yeah, no, it's all good. The value added, I mean, it really depends on what your needs are for your project. For us, I mean, I don't know if you've looked at the grant. It sounds like you got a really good overview from Becca and Dawn last week about it. And so, you're really kind of pigeonholed into a little bit of like 5 categories that you can use money for. And so marketing for us seemed a little bit like a no-brainer. Like Kaibab said, we didn't have money for a graphic designer. We didn't have money for, new packaging. And so like, we did put, I would say probably, half of our budget was, maybe a little less than half was for marketing, which was really cool because, people actually really loved it. I mean, they love our, we would buy plain bags and now they like love our new logo on our bags, for our greens or our carrots. And, we could buy merchandise and, like we're like the hip farm now, like everyone's wearing like our hats and, t-shirts and stuff that we like always wanted to do, but like, didn't have money for. And like Kaibab said, stuff you are already going to buy. We're already in buy bags. So we might as well, pay people to, do some graphic designing for us and make some really great bags and things like that. So like I said, it really depends on your need. We also, in the beginning, thought we were going to need a lot more money for labor. And because of sort of like how our time frame got like squished. We actually did need that money, all of it for labor, and we used it all in that 1 year, just to get the store off the ground. And because people expect to be paid more than they did like 3 years ago, which is kind of crazy that things can go so fast. So yeah, we changed our whole plan and hired a manager for the store rather than having one of us be a manager. And yeah, so those are the two things we spent the most money on. But like Kaibod said, we also spent money on, insurance, and, truck registration and some other things, that we would need for, the project anyway. And that's, yeah, like I said, the value added producer grant seems like they just want you to spend a lot of money on marketing. It seems like that's what it's there for. So, I mean, we did spend a lot of money on that.
Oh, because that's interesting, because we were just afraid. I mean, assuming that we write, the grant, well, it could be that maybe we would put as much as like 60% in marketing. And we were just concerned that may not be looked at well when it gets to the evaluation point, and they would be looking for us to put the money that we're asking for into other categories.
No. I mean, that was not my experience. I mean, for me, basically with that, they won't let you spend money on anything that's like a capital expense, anything. I mean, sort of, well, what I would deem as a farmer, and this is just me being a cynical farmer because that's what we are, but I mean, anything quote unquote useful, like, but marketing is useful, but as a farmer, we just want to put our money into like things that are going to help us farm better, not necessarily things that are going to help us sell food better. So I think if you are a farmer, you have to have a business, and I think that I think it's looked highly upon to see all that money in there for marketing. Plus, marketing is expensive. If you go, we used a friend who has a marketing, firm, and I just asked her point blank, like, if we want to do this, and this, like, give me an estimate. What's this going to cost us? And, we're like, well, all right, like, Megan, we can pay you to do this for like 3 years, and then we're gonna have to stop, because it's expensive. So I do not think that they would look down on that personally, but I am also not a professional grant writer.
Right, but that's encouraging. So if I have a disproportionate of the budget allocated to marketing and can justify it, we should go ahead and ask for it. It sounds like.
Yeah,
that's my opinion.
Well, the other thing to note, and this is from last weekend, and maybe these current grantees haven't had to write the reports yet, but you also want to be thinking ahead to what you're going to report as your success. So Katie already threw out, our sales were up 33%. Well, if you're going to focus most of your budget on marketing and new customer base, that's exactly the right metric. So part of what your budget should align with too is what success stories you'll be able to tell. So yeah, your marketing budget can be big and can be the entire thing if you're entirely about growing your sales base or the number of buyers or customers you get, because those will be the easiest metrics to share and reporting to them. But for Nan and the project she was talking about, and the project she was talking about, because she was talking about weaving a new network and tighter set of linkages, one of the success stories will be how rich those linkages are. So marketing budget wouldn't make sense for that. That would be about having conferences and courses and things. So just make sure whatever your budget is, there isn't a wrong budget. Just make sure it lines up with what you're saying you're going to do and what you can report was successful. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. That was helpful. Thank you.
Kaibod, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I would agree with Dawn. It needs to be cohesive. Everything, like when we apply for money for our grants, sometimes things are rejected. And I'm like, I turn back to my business plan and I say, look, it's in here. We put it in our business plan that we're going to use this money in this regard. And so I think you'd be just fine keeping the 20. We did 25% for our marketing. And honestly, we're having trouble spending it, which I thought was surprising. I wish I would have put more into supplies because our production has grown so much. But you can spend the marketing money. and maybe Katie can help me out here. I just haven't been able to find, they'll take all your money, but they haven't done anything for us.
Got it. Thank you.
Hats, Kai Bob, hats. Just go with the hats.
They told us we can't, our merchandise doesn't count as marketing because we sell it.
All right, this sounds like a different, an offline conversation.
I can't speak to that.
Okay, that's fine.
We'll get into the, you know, also we are recording this, so, you know, how much do we just only say things you want the USDA to maybe find somewhere on the internet? I don't know.
I mean, we
yeah.
do give away a lot of merchandise because it is marketing.
There you go. So you're going to send me a hat, right, Katie? No, I'm just kidding. Well, we are running low on time, so thank you all so much. I would love to hear if there's, as kind of a quick closeout from all of you, last pearl of wisdom, something you think people need to know that, you know, you didn't get to share yet.
I have one thing I really wanted to share. It's if at first you don't succeed. So with 3 of our grants, we did not get it the first time we applied. The really nice thing about federal grants is they actually give you reviewer comments, which I feel like is rare in the grant world. And then you can take that feedback and apply again the next year. And we were successful the next year with those 3 grants. So don't get too discouraged if you don't get it the first year. You can build on that application and apply again.
Any other last pearls of wisdom from our presenters?
I suppose I would say when I started it, I always thought grants were free money, and they're not really. They're earned through the application process. So keep that in mind when you're going through it.
Yeah, I would say keeping a positive attitude and going outside and moving and doing some farming in between and eating well during these application processes. They're really sucking a lot of energy out of you, and rightfully so, right? What we just heard from K-Bob. But just maintaining a positive attitude is an important step.
Yes, awesome. Well, thank you all so much. I learned a ton. I think those are all good things to think about too, right? As what is this going to take to get it done, and also to manage it, right? I think Katie was talking at one point about it was slow to get the money, you know, even though they'd gotten the grant and had been promised, right? Then there's still the process of actually submitting the reimbursement stuff through the federal government. So, you know, just being aware of what that looks like, what you're taking on. A couple of quick things from the last time too is go find collaborators. The value-added producer grant is a little bit less so, right? It's going to be more about the feasibility study and your business plan on your farm or your winery or vineyard, whatever you're doing. But for the other ones, they definitely will look at who your partners are. So important to think about that. And then
add something really quick. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My brain is slow these days. But last week, did you guys touch on the fact that if you make money from your value-added producer grant, that you like, they don't really look highly on that? I don't like, there's like different things that you do if you actually make a profit from your value-added producer grant. Did you guys talk about that at all last week, Dawn or Becca?
About what specifically? Oh, about if you make money?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess it defines how you make money, because if, as Kabab said, if you are using any of your management or paid staff salary to initiate new projects, which you're then, the other thing besides managing the grant that you're deserving this money for is the fact you guys are willing to be on webinars like this, and you're going to let those of us who partner with you write case studies of how they went. So, you know, I think make money is a relative thing, because if you really actually track the amount of time spend. I don't think they want to constrain your ability to make money. I just think they wanted to limit the amount of risk they put into it by how much they would continue seeding those marketing efforts without them paying off. I've never heard the AMS ever talk about tracking your actual sales and profitability to see if you're making money and having that affect your grant amount at all. But maybe I'm not understanding your question.
No, it's not about the affecting my grant amount. But I guess what I wanted to say was that when we got the grant, we had a meeting with our grant manager, and something that I did not know that at the beginning, and I read that grant like probably 100 times just to make sure that like I wasn't missing anything, was that they are tracking if your enterprise is making, and if your enterprise is making a profit, then all of a sudden, like it does. The way he explained it to me was that he didn't want the government didn't want it to look like they were helping people make money, which was really strange. And so you could use your expenses, like your production expenses, against the what your profit was, to show that you made less profit. Because if you show that you made a profit, that you would actually have to pay back some of the money. So that was very new to me, and I was like,
whoever you're talking to is crazy. That's the whole point of these grants. I will say
that I did get like very conflicting information from people, like when I was trying to apply for this grant. And so that is, whenever they ask for a progress report, they always ask like, what are the profits from this enterprise? And so that was something he warned me about, and that, there were ways around it, but that was something that was concerning to me about that situation. And, you and I can talk separately about that later, which is fine. But what I did want to warn people that was a possibility.
What I would just say is a consistent thing is they can't help you build wealth. That's why they don't let you buy equipment. But yes, it kind of gets back to what I was saying, Katie. Even if you think you're making profits off this enterprise, and by this enterprise is just the scope of work of your grant, then you are probably not allocating enough of the salary and wages and time you're spending managing it. And if you actually really did that with true cost accounting, you'd probably be fine. That's probably what he's telling you. Yeah, let's take it offline. But there are some guidance you guys can get, and that's way too detailed for this call. But Katie, I'm sorry you're getting conflicting things, and that does sound very confusing.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't mean to bring it up and make it confusing for anybody. But it was just something that I was like kind of like shocked at when I found out we got the grant. So maybe it's something really different than I thought it was.
Yeah, definitely important to
but at least I was smart enough to be able to navigate this grant system, right? So I can't be that wrong, right?
Yes, it sounds like something we definitely need to look into, and we will report back. Just wanted to, so first of all, thank you so much to our 4 presenters. You guys were awesome. This was so helpful. You've been getting some love in the chat, so thank you so much for sharing your experience. For everyone on the call still, just wanted to give you guys a heads up, and I think Wendy has been chatting these in, but a couple tools for collaboration, since that's such a big piece of this. So again, we mentioned this at the beginning of the call. Please do fill out the survey and let us know. It's not just a like, how'd we do on the webinar, but it really is giving a little bit more information about like what you might be trying to do and how we can support that. So really appreciate that. We have a Slack channel that folks can join, and that way you can talk to each other throughout this process. So if things come up, probably somebody else is having, might have that same question or might have an answer for you. So this way folks can kind of communicate while this process is going. And then there's also a spreadsheet that we've created where you can put in your name, organization, and which grant you're applying for, what region you're in, and that will hopefully be a good way to find other collaborators, know what folks in your region might be doing. Maybe somebody else has a similar idea in a different part of the state. You might want to talk to them. So please use all of these, all of this to, sorry, I'm trying to get this to go. Also, the CSU's food systems website, super great resource, has a lot of information You can learn more there, and Wendy should be putting that in the chat as well. Again, please join us on April 28th, 2 weeks from now, for the final of these 3 webinars to provide feedback, and so we can share that. And again, we will be sharing that. That'll be focused both on the state and the federal processes. CSU is offering support, so if you're actually going to write one of these and get it down into the weeds, you can sign up for office hours and be able to talk with Dawn or Becca directly and get their wisdom. Also, do please reach out to the folks that were presenting today, as well as some of the other folks that have been successful. Mentorship and kind of helping other new farmers or new organizations navigate this process is part of what most of these organizations and farms are happy to do. So reach out. You can find a list of who has gotten past awards on this USDA website. So that's a great way if someone is in your region or someone maybe has a somewhat similar project, feel free to reach out to them. So again, thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much to our speakers. You guys were amazing. I learned so much. I'm sure everybody else did. And enjoy your Thursday.